Dear friend, picture with me the first cool mornings of September. The cicadas quiet down, the sun lingers lower in the sky, and a gentle crispness slips into the breeze. This month feels like a doorway between the heat of summer and the hush of autumn, and for gardeners, it is both a farewell and an invitation. The flowers we've tended all season begin to lean tiredly, while fresh possibilities hide beneath the soil, waiting for a little encouragement. September is often misunderstood as a time to wind everything down. But in truth, it is one of the most important months in the garden. The choices we make now, what we plant, what we prune, what we leave untouched, will shape not only the last beauty of this year, but the strength of next spring. And as we sit together talking through the mistakes many of us have made in this in-between season, I hope you'll feel that same mix of peace and anticipation, knowing that it's never too late to garden wisely, no matter your age, budget, or ability. It's easy to feel that once September arrives, the garden must be stripped bare as though tidiness itself is a badge of honor. Many gardeners, especially those of us who like order and neatness, get the urge to pull every tired plant, sweep away every fallen petal, and tuck the garden into a false winter rest before it's time. But the truth is, September is not the end. It's the gentle pause before the encore. I remember visiting a neighbor's yard years ago. She had yanked out her zinnias and marigolds in early September, only to regret it when warm days lingered and the butterflies kept searching for nectar. Her bare beds looked tidy, yes, but they lost their life too soon. Those messy plants would have offered food to bees making their final rounds and color to cheer the neighborhood. Instead of rushing to clean, think of your September garden as a quilt that still holds warmth. Leave your coneflowers standing, their seed heads will feed goldfinches. Allow marigolds, petunias, and cosmos to linger if they're still giving blooms. Even fading tomato vines with their last stubborn fruits can surprise you with one more ripe bite. And if you're worried about the work later, remember removing plants in late October after the first frost is often easier because the plants are dry and pull up with less effort. This saves strain on our backs and arms, which is no small gift as we age. Rushing into a too clean garden in September is a bit like closing a book before the final chapter. There are still lessons, still beauty, still stories waiting to be told in those remaining weeks. By letting the garden fade at its own pace, we give nature its rhythm and ourselves a gentler transition into autumn. The garden, like us, doesn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. Sometimes the best thing you can do in September is to sit on your porch, watch those last blossoms, and let them remind you that life is not about rushing to the end, but savoring the last sweet notes before the season turns. There's an old saying among gardeners, if you take care of the soil will take care of you. Yet September often tempts us to overlook that truth. After months of tending plants through summer heat, many of us feel ready to rest, and we forget that the ground beneath our feet has been working just as hard as we have. By September, beds can be tired, nutrients depleted, and soil structure weakened. Ignoring this moment to refresh and rebuild is like leaving a weary traveler without a place to rest. I learned this lesson in my own backyard one September years ago. I had a small raised bed where I grew tomatoes and peppers every summer. By the third year, I noticed the plants looked spindly, the fruit smaller, and the leaves more prone to disease. I thought perhaps my seeds were faulty or the weather unkind. But an older neighbor gently reminded me, the soil is like a pantry, dear. You've emptied it. Now you must restock it. That autumn, I layered compost made from kitchen scraps and fallen leaves, along with a sprinkle of aged manure. I didn't plant anything new, just let the earth absorb that feast over winter. The following spring, those beds came alive in a way that felt miraculous, lush green, and generous once again. Refreshing soil in September does not require heavy labor. Simply spreading a few inches of compost over empty beds or gently working leaf mold into the top layer can restore nutrients. For gardeners with limited strength, a light scattering of shredded leaves allowed to settle and break down through the fall works wonders. Even something as simple as sowing a cover crop like clover or rye can shield the soil, enrich it, and reduce weeds for next year. When we ignore soil renewal, we pass the burden on to spring, making it harder on ourselves later. But when we give the soil a gift in September, We're really giving a gift to our future selves. It's a reminder that just like people, the earth needs rest, nourishment, and care to keep offering its best. And maybe that's the deeper lesson. As we feed the ground, we practice the same patience and kindness we hope others will offer us in our own seasons of weariness. For many gardeners, September feels like the grand finale. The tomatoes are slowing, the cucumbers have grown weary, and the squash vines look tangled and tired. It's easy to believe that the season is over, that the gardening year is finished. But September is not a curtain call, it's an encore waiting to happen. Forgetting fall vegetables is one of the most common mistakes, and it robs us of some of the sweetest, most tender harvests of the year. I remember one September when I'd given up on planting anything more. A friend stopped by and handed me a small packet of spinach seeds, urging me to scatter them in my empty beds. "They'll surprise you," she said. And she was right. Within weeks, tiny green leaves unfurled, and by October I was harvesting crisp spinach for my morning omelets. Kale, too, thrives in the cool air. Lettuce varieties like romaine and butterhead grow tender and less bitter when they mature in autumn's gentle light. And carrots, oh carrots pulled from cool fall soil, are far sweeter than their summer cousins, as if the chill coaxes out their sugars. The best part is that fall gardening often asks less of us. Weeding is lighter, pests are fewer, and watering needs are more balanced with the softer weather. For older gardeners or those working with limited energy, fall crops are a quiet blessing, less demanding but no less rewarding. Even a small container of leafy greens on the porch can supply fresh salads into late autumn. When we forget to plant fall vegetables, we miss out on nourishment that comes when the year is slowing down, reminding us that productivity and growth don't belong only to the bright energy of summer. They belong also to the cooler, quieter times when patience is rewarded. In many ways, fall vegetables reflect our own season of life, steady, resilient, and full of surprising sweetness when given the chance. September weather can be tricky. One day brings a gentle chill, the next still feels like midsummer, and the soil plays its own quiet game beneath our feet. Many gardeners make the mistake of assuming that cooler days mean less need for water. Others, fearing drought, overcompensate and drown their plants. Both extremes, too much or too little, can cause stress, root rot, or drooping leaves just when the garden is trying to settle peacefully into autumn. I remember one September when my potted mums looked pitiful, their leaves limp and blossoms browning at the edges. I thought I had neglected them, so I rushed to water, drenching the soil. But the next day they looked worse. A wiser gardener friend visited and knelt by the pot, pushing her finger gently into the soil. "It's soggy," she said kindly. "They're drowning, not thirsting." She showed me how to let the soil breathe between waterings to give moisture when the top inch was dry instead of on a rigid schedule. Within a week, those mums perked back up, almost as if grateful for my patience. The key in September is balance. Beds still need steady hydration because roots remain active, but growth has slowed, so their thirst isn't as intense as in July. For older gardeners, one of the simplest tools is a lightweight moisture meter. You just slip it into the soil and let it tell you the truth. This saves guesswork, and more importantly, saves aching knees and backs from too much bending and testing. Overwatering or underwatering in September is a lesson in moderation, a reminder that more is not always better, and less is not always wise. The soil, like our own lives, thrives on steady, thoughtful attention rather than extremes. When we water with care, we nurture not only the garden, but also a rhythm of gentleness, one that reflects the balance many of us seek in this season of life. There is a quiet joy in planting bulbs in September. It feels almost like writing a love letter to the future, tucking beauty into the soil, now trusting it to surprise you in spring. Yet many gardeners, eager for that promise, make the mistake of planting bulbs too shallow, too deep, or without considering the layering that makes them flourish. When spring comes, the results may be sparse blooms or bulbs that never break the surface. I recall the first time I planted tulips with little understanding of their needs. I simply dug a small hole, dropped them in, and covered them lightly. That winter was harsh, and come April, only a few weak sprouts appeared, their flowers small and short-lived. An elderly neighbor smiled knowingly and explained bulbs need to be settled deep enough to stay safe, but shallow enough to still feel the warmth of spring. She showed me the simple rule of thumb: plant each bulb at a depth about 3 times its height. When I followed that advice, the next year the tulips rose tall and proud, a sweep of color that felt like a thank you note from the earth. September is also the perfect time to practice bulb layering, sometimes called the lasagna method. Place larger bulbs like daffodils or tulips at the bottom, then cover with soil and add smaller bulbs like crocus or grape hyacinths above them. Come spring, the blooms will appear in succession, extending beauty over weeks instead of days. For gardeners with limited mobility, this can be done in pots or raised beds, making it easier to prepare beauty without strain. Planting bulbs correctly is a practice of patience and foresight. It reminds us that some of life's rewards are not immediate, but require trust through a season of waiting. Just as bulbs rest quietly through winter, so too do we carry within us hidden strength and beauty that emerges when the time is right. And if we take care in September, spring will repay us with a gift far greater than the effort it took. September often tricks us into thinking our perennials and shrubs don't need much attention. After all, many of them are still green, still standing, still holding shape while annuals fade. Yet this is the very time when they quietly prepare for winter. Cutting back too harshly, pruning at the wrong moment, or forgetting to protect them before frost can cause lasting damage that won't appear until spring. Neglect here is not seen in September. It shows itself months later when new shoots are weak or blossoms fewer. I once learned this the hard way with a row of hydrangeas. Their leaves looked ragged by early fall, so I clipped them down, eager for tidiness. The following year, not a single bloom appeared. A more seasoned gardener later explained that I had pruned away the very stems that would have carried next season's flowers. My mistake cost me a year of beauty. Since then, I've learned the value of restraint. In September, the wisest approach is to tidy, gently remove only what is diseased, damaged, or clearly spent. Leave the rest. Many perennials benefit from keeping their structure through the winter. Sedum echinacea and ornamental grasses stand tall, adding interest and feeding birds with their seeds. Shrubs like lilac or forsythia should wait until after spring flowering for major pruning. Instead of cutting, consider supporting. A light layer of mulch at their base, or even a simple burlap wrap for tender shrubs, can shield roots and bark against frost. For older gardeners, this gentler style of care also means less strain, less bending, less hauling, fewer heavy tasks. And perhaps there's a deeper wisdom here: not everything that looks untidy needs fixing. Sometimes leaving a plant as it is allows nature to finish its work in her own time. Just as we age with marks and changes that tell our story, plants too carry beauty in their endurance. Neglecting perennials isn't just about missing a step. It's about overlooking the quiet strength of things that persist year after year. It can be hard to say goodbye. Those petunias that brightened your porch all summer, the marigolds that cheered the walkway, or the tomato vines that gifted you juicy harvests, they feel like old friends. Many gardeners, out of attachment, let these annuals linger long after their time has passed. But by holding on too long, we allow them to drain nutrients from the soil, crowd out new growth, and invite pests or disease to settle in. I remember one September when I couldn't bring myself to clear away my sun-worn petunias. They had grown scraggly, but I kept watering them, hoping for one last burst of blooms. Instead, they grew weaker, and I noticed aphids gathering around them. It wasn't until I finally cleared the bed that I realized how much space they were stealing from the cool weather pansies and cabbages I could have planted instead. My reluctance had cost me the chance to enjoy fresh, vibrant beauty through autumn. September invites us to practice a gentle letting go. Removing annuals doesn't mean dismissing their worth. It honors the cycle they've completed. Once they're gone, you can refresh the soil, sprinkle in compost, and welcome new seasonal plants like mum's violas or ornamental kale. For those who find the physical work tiring, even replacing just a few worn pots with fresh autumn containers can transform the space and lift the spirit. There's a quiet wisdom in clearing spent plants. It teaches us that endings make room for beginnings. Just as we must release certain habit, seasons, or even roles in our own lives, the garden too asks us to embrace change. By letting go of what has finished its purpose, we create space for beauty yet to come. And September, with its gentle light and softer air, reminds us that endings can be graceful, not sorrowful, a chance to prepare for something new. Mulch is one of the simplest gifts you can give your September garden, yet many skip it thinking it's only a summer chore. In truth, mulch in early fall is like a quilt laid over the soil, keeping it warm, conserving moisture, and shielding it from weeds that would otherwise sprout before winter. Skipping this step leaves the ground exposed, vulnerable to erosion, temperature swings, and nutrient loss. I once skipped mulching in September, convinced it wasn't worth the effort. By November, I noticed patches of bare earth in my flower beds, the soil cracked and dry. Come spring, weeds seemed to have claimed the first invitation, sprouting before my flowers had a chance. The difference the next year, when I layered shredded leaves and a little straw, was astonishing. The soil stayed soft, moist, and almost entirely weed-free. It felt like I had tucked my garden into a warm blanket before the cold arrived. Mulch doesn't need to be heavy or expensive. Autumn offers its own supply. Fallen leaves can be shredded and spread lightly. Grass clippings can work in thin layers, and pine needles create a soft carpet that breaks down slowly. For those with less energy, a light scattering is better than nothing at all. Even placing a few handfuls around the base of perennials or shrubs can protect roots from sudden frost. Ground covers are another overlooked ally. Plants like creeping thyme or clover act as living mulch, shielding the soil while adding texture and charm. They require little effort once established and offer a soft, natural look. Skipping mulch is more than just a missed gardening step. It's a missed opportunity to ease your future work. A few minutes in September saves hours of weeding and watering later. It is a small act of foresight, a way of telling your garden, rest easy. I've thought ahead for you. And perhaps, as we bend gently to scatter those leaves or straw, we remind ourselves of the importance of preparing for our own seasons of rest, covering what is tender and trusting that quiet care will yield peace in the months ahead. When September arrives, many gardeners focus only on the beds and borders, forgetting that container plants live by different rules. Pots dry out faster even on cool days because the soil is exposed on all sides. Skipping their care can mean losing vibrant color weeks before frost. Overlooking container plants in September is like leaving good friends unattended at a gathering. They fade quietly, even when a little attention would keep them thriving. I remember an old terracotta pot on my porch filled with geraniums. In September, I grew distracted by the larger beds and forgot to check it daily. One afternoon, I noticed the leaves shriveled, the soil powder dry. I almost tossed the whole thing out, thinking it was too far gone. But a neighbor suggested I give it a chance, so I soaked the pot, gently trimmed the worst leaves, and waited. To my amazement, within a week, the geraniums were blooming again, as if they had been waiting for that kindness. The lesson with containers is simple: treat them differently. Water more consistently, but in smaller amounts since pots drain faster. Consider moving them closer to the house where they are easier to reach and less likely to be forgotten. In September, refreshing the top inch of soil with compost or mixing in slow-release fertilizer can carry them through the season. And if your energy is limited, downsizing to a few favorite pots on the porch or patio makes the work manageable without losing the joy. Overlooking container plants isn't just about missed flowers. It's about forgetting the small joys that sit closest to our doorsteps. Those pots are often the first and last things we see each day: a splash of red, a soft cluster of blooms, or even a simple green herb reaching toward the light. By caring for them in September, we remind ourselves that beauty doesn't need to be vast to be meaningful. Sometimes it sits right beside us, waiting for a sip of water and a moment of notice. September brings a shift not only for gardens, but for the creatures who share them. As days shorten, squirrels, rabbits, and even deer become bolder, searching for food to store or sustain them through the colder months. Many gardeners overlook this change, thinking the battles with pests are over once summer ends. But ignoring wildlife in September can undo months of effort. Tender greens, ripening squash, and even bulbs tucked into the soil can become a feast overnight. I once planted a neat row of spinach in early September, only to find every leaf nibbled to stubs within a week. At first I thought it was disease, but then I spotted a little rabbit slipping under the fence at dawn. I couldn't be angry, it was simply trying to survive. But it taught me the importance of gentle preparation. Instead of harsh deterrence, I learned small, thoughtful measures worked best. A bit of mesh around the raised bed, sprinkling cayenne near plants, or planting sacrificial rows of clover and parsley away from my main crops gave the wildlife options without robbing me completely. For bulbs, I discovered that squirrels love to dig them up almost as quickly as I plant them. A trick passed down from a gardening friend was to lay a piece of chicken wire flat over the soil after planting, then cover it lightly with mulch. The bulbs sprouted right through, but the squirrels couldn't dig down. It felt like a small victory that required almost no effort. Older gardeners may find it hard to put up tall fences or heavy barriers, but even simple things help. Hanging reflective ribbons, scattering coffee grounds, or using lightweight netting can discourage curious visitors. The truth is, September teaches us that the garden is not ours alone. We share it with the wild, and while we must protect what we've nurtured, we can do so with compassion. In many ways, these creatures remind us of our own instinct to prepare to store up comfort and sustenance for the seasons ahead. Balancing their needs with our own is not always perfect, but with thoughtfulness, it can be kind. When we think of September, most of us focus on vegetables, flowers, and maybe shrubs. But the lawn often slips our mind. After all, it looks green enough, doesn't it? Yet September is the secret season when lawns recover from summer stress and prepare for winter. Forgetting to care for it now means thin patches, stubborn weeds, and dull grass that will linger until spring. I once ignored my lawn one September, assuming the cool nights and morning dew would take care of it. By March, bare spots spread across the yard, and crabgrass had crept in like an uninvited guest. It took twice the effort and expense to repair what could have been prevented with a little autumn care. The following year, I tried a different approach, spreading a light layer of seed in September, along with a gentle feeding. By spring, my lawn was thicker, greener, and healthier than it had been in years. That small effort in fall made all the difference. September is the ideal month for overseeding, aerating, and lightly fertilizing the lawn. Aeration sounds daunting, but for smaller spaces, even using a hand tool to poke small holes allows roots to breathe. For those of us who don't want heavy labor scattering seed in bare spots and letting autumn rains settle them is enough. Even simply mowing a bit higher, around 3 inches, protects the grass as temperatures shift. For older gardeners, tending the lawn doesn't have to mean pushing heavy machines or hauling large bags. A small spreader or even shaking seed gently by hand works well for modest yards. And remember, perfection isn't the goal. A healthy lawn is not about being flawless, but about creating a soft, steady green space that frames the beauty of your garden beds. Neglecting the lawn in September is like forgetting to mend a coat. Before winter, you'll feel the chill later. A little foresight now makes the ground beneath your feet strong, ready to greet spring with resilience. And perhaps as we walk across that grass next year, barefoot on a soft morning, we'll smile, knowing the work we did in September was really a gift to our future selves. When September arrives, it's tempting to rush into planting, especially if there are open spaces in the garden. We see bare soil and feel the urge to fill it quickly, tucking in bulbs, buying bargain plants at end-of-season sales, or moving perennials without much thought. But planting without planning often leads to overcrowding, poor spacing, and a garden that feels more chaotic than restful come spring. I once bought a handful of clearance tulip bulbs in September, excited to save money and bring more color to my beds. Without thinking, I planted them in clusters far too close to my existing daffodils. By spring, the daffodils towered over the tulips, stealing their sunlight. The tulips bloomed weakly and never returned the following year. What I had hoped would be a joyful mix turned into a crowded patch with neither plant showing its best. That mistake taught me the value of pausing before planting, of imagining how the bed would look, not just now, but months from now. A simple plan doesn't require elaborate drawings or hours of work. Take a walk through your garden and picture the height, spread, and timing of each plant. Leave enough space between bulbs or shrubs to allow air and light to circulate. If bending or digging deeply is difficult, consider raised beds or containers where spacing is easier to control. Even jotting a few notes on paper about where you've planted helps prevent confusion next spring. Planting thoughtfully also allows you to weave in beauty with purpose, choosing blooms that overlap in timing so the garden always has something to show, or pairing plants that support one another. Herbs, for example, not only add fragrance but can deter pests when planted near vegetables. The garden is a mirror of our own lives. Just as rushing into decisions without reflection can leave us tangled and weary, planting without planning creates strain for the months ahead. But with a little patience in September, we set the stage for harmony, balance, and a garden that feels restful rather than crowded. Planning is at its heart an act of kindness for the plants, for the soil, and for ourselves. Sometimes in the quiet urgency of September gardening, we forget the most important part of the equation: ourselves. We bend to pull weeds, carry watering cans, and tidy beds with determination, but too often we overlook the body that makes all this possible. Forgetting to rest is one of the most common mistakes, especially as we age. The truth is, no garden task is so urgent that it cannot wait for us to pause, stretch, or sit in the shade with a cool drink. I remember one September afternoon when I pushed myself too hard. Determined to clear a flower bed before supper, I kept working long after my back began to ache. That night I could barely move, and the next morning the garden remained unfinished anyway. A wiser friend later told me, "The garden doesn't mind if you rest. It will wait for you." Those words reshaped the way I tend my space. Now I work in small portions, 15 minutes of effort, then a gentle break. I use lightweight tools, raised beds and stools that allow me to work sitting down. The tasks still get done, but my body thanks me instead of punishing me. September itself is a reminder of rest. The days grow shorter, the air cooler, the pace softer. Just as the earth slows to prepare for winter, so too are we invited to find rhythms of gentleness. For those of us who have spent years giving our energy to gardens, families, or work, this season reminds us that tending ourselves is not selfish. It is part of the cycle of care. When we forget to rest, we risk making the garden a place of strain rather than joy. But when we honor our limits, the work becomes a form of peace, a way of moving with the seasons instead of against them. Rest is not wasted time. It is soil for the spirit, allowing us to bloom again tomorrow. And that may be the most important gardening wisdom of all, that both the earth and the gardener must be cared for with patience and love. As September unfolds, the garden whispers lessons that stretch far beyond soil and seed. Each so-called mistake we've spoken of isn't truly failure. It's an invitation to slow down, observe, and adjust with gentleness. Rushing to clean too soon, forgetting to renew the soil, overlooking fall vegetables, or planting without planning. These are not endings, but reminders that gardening, like life, is a practice of patience and humility. The earth forgives us more than we forgive ourselves, and every season offers another chance to do things differently. I think of the years when I made nearly every error in this list: overwatering mums, clipping hydrangeas too harshly, clinging to fading petunias out of sentiment. Yet the garden still gave me beauty, still taught me quietly. That is the grace of this work. Even in imperfection, there is harvest. Perhaps that is why so many of us find comfort here in our later years. The garden shows us that mistakes do not cancel out growth. They simply guide us toward wisdom. As you step into your own September tasks, remember that you don't need youth strength or endless resources to create beauty. What you need is imagination, patience, and the willingness to see possibility in small acts. A sprinkle of mulch, a handful of compost, a rest taken beneath the porch roof while the breeze moves through the trees. Each act of care, however small, shapes the story your garden will tell in the seasons ahead. So, dear friend, may this September be a month of learning, of gentle rhythms, and of joy in the simplest tasks. Which lesson spoke to you most deeply today? I'd love to hear which idea brings you peace as you move through your garden. And if you'd like to continue sharing in these quiet conversations, I welcome you to join me again by subscribing for more gentle inspiration. Until next time, may your hands find rest, your garden find strength, and your days be filled with beauty.